Centuries ago, the hero Baldur spent years questing in lands across the Sea of Swords and beyond. When finally he returned to his village of Grey Harbor, he brought fantastic wealth with him, much of which he gifted to friends and family. These boons greatly improved Grey Harbor's fortunes, launching businesses, expanding its docks, and seeing the creation of a defensive wall around the town. In honor of their heroic patron, the citizens came to call one of their new wall's passages Baldur's Gate. Within a generation, though, the gate became synonymous with the community, and the settlement known as Baldur's Gate began appearing on maps of the Sword Coast. The city's surprising growth attracted all manner of people. Peasants affected by raiding and war, farmers rendered penniless by famine and drought, pirates seeking a neutral port. All types saw a chance to put their mark on a rapidly growing community. Welcome back, adventurers, to the Warm Fire. In today's Sunday lore video, even though it's Friday, so forgive me this week, we have a very special guest who will be helping us learn a bit more about the city of Baldur's Gate. Now, Larian Studios with Baldur's Gate 3 has made it very clear that the city itself is going to be a major location in the game, which of course makes sense. And we even got to see what appears to be an in-game rendering of a portion of the lower part of the city. Going back to 2019, I also want to bring up an old tweet where Larian stated that an ancient evil has returned to Baldur's Gate, intent on devouring it from the inside out. So without further ado, let's learn a bit more about this mercantile stronghold of the West. But forget me, I have someone better to give you all an introduction. Hey, Ed.
Hi. From the deepest corners of the Forgotten Realms, hello to the Wolf Pack. I'm Ed Greenwood. This guy. I'm the creator of the Forgotten Realms, and I'm the creator of Baldur's Gate, the city, not the game. And Baldur's Gate is one of the biggest and most important merchant trading cities in all the realms, which is one of the reasons it's always been a center of attention. Baldur's Gate is ideal for a computer game, or a series of computer games, because it's big, and wealthy, and important, but it's also isolated, so game designers can have major things happen there that, thanks to the wealth and the busy trade, whatever the very important things are very soon going to affect the entire world, but they can have these things unfold in a game without also having to program into the game a military reaction from a kingdom that's right next door, because there are no kingdoms right next door. And what that means is the characters that players play in the game have the chance to be the heroes, and their actions truly matter. At the same time, the gate is big and rich enough that it can be home to not just a villain or two to fight, but a whole organization of them, and a completely separate plot involving an evil god and the followers and servant creatures of that god that can clash and sow confusion and leave players of the game in the middle of a mystery they're going to have to figure out, not just fight everyone and everything that gets in their way. So, it's almost tailor-made to host a computer game, said the tailor. And if you wanted to learn more about Baldur's Gate, come on over to my channel, my YouTube channel, where we're going to do a deep dive on Baldur's Gate. And hopefully, by the time you get there, already have.
So there you have it, the creator of the Forgotten Realms himself, and to this day, Ed does continue to help in its writing. I should also quickly note, before we get back to our discussion on the city, is that Ed is the author of the Elminster series, and Elminster is a very famous, powerful wizard in the Forgotten Realms that I would say actually has a decent chance of showing up in Baldur's Gate 3. It really was a huge honor to have Ed on the channel, and the only favor I ask from you all is after this video is over, or even right now, open up a new tab and please go and subscribe to the fairly new Ed Greenwood YouTube channel. This is currently my favorite channel on the tube, so let's show the power of the Wolf Pack, and hopefully we can get some more opportunities to have folks like Ed back in the future. All right, back to talking about the city. So like Ed mentioned, the city of Baldur's Gate is quite isolated, and you're not going to see any major towns or cities in its immediate vicinity here. And we're looking at probably a 200-mile journey from the city of Baldur's Gate to Elturel, and Elturel is the only somewhat large city that's even remotely close to the city of Baldur's Gate. And Elturel is, of course, currently in an apocalyptic state due to the events in Descent into Avernus. And I will do a video on that in the near future. And to the south here, we have the town of Baragost, which isn't really like a major city. So there's no major threats that are really close to Baldur's Gate. Before I zoom out even more to show you some potential threats to the city, I do want to point out that Baldur's Gate is on the Sword Coast, of course, and it has great access to the Sea of Swords. And this is a major reason why Baldur's Gate is such a powerhouse for trade. Ships can easily reach the northern cities up here of Neverwinter, Luskan, and Waterdeep. They can sail out west, and this is actually where Baldurin, the founder of Baldur's Gate, sailed out to, and he came back with treasure, which ultimately started the city. Or ships can sail south all the way down to Kalimshan. Another reason why it is such a powerhouse of trade is the river Chianthar, which passes right by Baldur's Gate, goes into the Sea of Swords, and it reaches out east, going past Elturel and then touching upon several other cities and towns. And of course, this is a major tradeway. So Baldur's Gate kind of controls the access that, you know, the northern cities and the southern cities have to getting to some of these cities over here in the east that are inland. And vice versa, if the city of Elturel wants to trade with Luskan in the north and they want to do this by ship, they of course have to pass by Baldur's Gate. And this really just makes Baldur's Gate such an important, powerful city. But let's zoom out a little bit more, and down here to the south you will see the nation of Amn. And actually in Baldur's Gate 1, Amn and Baldur's Gate are on the verge of war with each other due to an event going on called the Iron Crisis. I won't get into details on that in this particular video. Ultimately, this war doesn't happen due to several elements in the plot, but we can't ignore that if Amn wanted to go to war with Baldur's Gate and wanted to attack the city, they would have to mobilize their troops, travel through all this very rough terrain, very far up here along the coast to get to the city of Baldur's Gate. And Baldur's Gate, of course, has access to the sea. It's located on the river Chianthar with a bridge going across it, which is a nice choke point. And the city itself of Baldur's Gate is surrounded by a very large, sturdy, probably mostly impenetrable wall. Now, it's only fair to also look to the north, and really the only major powerhouse, super powerful city would be Waterdeep. And if we follow the trade way right here, which is a major trade route, a major land trade route that goes all the way from the north in Luskan down to the desert nation of Kalimshan, with Baldur's Gate kind of being in the center of that road, which is another reason why Baldur's Gate is so powerful and important. That road right there is going to take you probably a month or two of travel time to get from one city to the other, let's say on horseback. So if Waterdeep wanted to attack Baldur's Gate, you're looking at a whole mess of logistical problems. And the reason why I'm showing you all this is because Ed brought up how Baldur's Gate was so isolated yet so important at the same time. And it's a really great location for a video game because you can have all sorts of things happen in the city that are actually, you know, continent changing. However, nothing immediate is really going to happen to the city except what happens within it. Taking a closer look at one of Larian's BG3 early access in-game maps, you can see right here the long and windy Chianthar River. And on the left, we have a zoomed in view of the city of Baldur's Gate. And on the far right, there's these little icons that represent different areas of the map that we're able to visit right now in early access, because this is where the majority of Act 1 takes place. The city of Elturel would of course be further to the east following the Chianthar River. But looking back at the city, you can see how it's nestled in this rocky bay area off of the Chianthar River. And this of course is very close to the Sea of Swords as well. As you have likely already discerned, Baldur's Gate is not really an easy city to launch an attack on from the outside from the perspective of another military force. Now, that's why a lot of things happen within the city that end up being really important and significant, but a lot of the problems arise from within. But we can't forget, there are seemingly nautiloid ships flying around with mine flares, so an aerial attack on the city, I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but it is a possibility when we look back at the reveal trailer for Baldur's Gate 3 that came out in 2019, it looks like the city's not doing too good, and there's a lot of, space octopuses flying around. I'll be doing a lore video on the mind flayers in the very near future. Now, this bridge right here is the choke point that I was talking about earlier. And if an army of Amn, for example, actually made the long journey up to Baldur's Gate, they would have to cross this bridge, which would be very, very dangerous. These little buildings that you can see outside of the city's walls make up an area called the Outer City, which is comprised of several different districts. For the most part, the Outer City is the slums. It's a rather lawless area, mostly controlled by criminals, even though Baldur's Gate's mercenary force, the Flaming Fist, does technically have rule over it. The road that comes into the Outer City from the northeast is likely the road that we players will be arriving to the city on, but whether or not we get to experience this road or even the Outer City itself still remains a mystery. I should also note here how difficult it would be for an attacking force to arrive by sea, or the east side of the river, as Baldur's Gate has the advantage of being able to set up some really hard to get through choke points, and they have the cover of the rocky terrain. This area on the bottom of the map that starts to become green is likely the start of the Cloakwood Forest, and the reason why I'm pointing this out is because you not only visit the Cloakwood in Baldur's Gate 1, but BG3's Early Access references this forest quite a few times, and it's home to the radicalized Shadow Druids faction. Zooming in even more, and right now I'm using a map of Baldur's Gate that can be found in the Descent into Avernus campaign module, you can see the several different districts of the Outer City that I mentioned earlier. The district of Little Kalimshan, right here, resembles the desert nation of Kalimshan to the south, and this district is run by the very powerful criminal organization known as the Guild. The two main gates into the city are the eastern gate, known as the Basilisk Gate, which is lined with stone statues of prominent deceased patriars, and the Black Dragon Gate on the north side, which earned its name from a large stone statue of a dragon head that looms over the inner side of the wall. These gates in modern-day Forgotten Realms will likely actually be closed, or at the very least extremely strictly enforced and monitored due to the refugee crisis that is taking place, as citizens from the devastated city of Elturel attempt to take refuge within the walls of Baldur's Gate. It seems quite likely that we players will actually be witnessing some of that drama take place in front of our very own eyes. Taking a look at the heart of the city, you'll notice that it's divided into two major sections by a large wall that runs diagonally from the southwest to the northeast, separating the lower city from the upper city. The upper city is home to the rich folk, and it contains the beautiful temple district, as well as the most important government buildings in the city, such as High Hall or Ducal Palace, Ducal Palace for those who played Baldur's Gate 1, and that's the meeting place for the city's wealthy nobles. The lower city serves as the gate's mercantile hub, and the gate is simply another name for Baldur's Gate. This section of the city houses the city's docks, several businesses, taverns, and even temples. The lower city can be a very dangerous place, though, if you're not careful, as it's riddled with crime, and actually the city's prison is located in the Sea Tower of Baldurin, which is right here off of the Sea Tower district, and it's nestled on a rocky island in the bay of the city. The Sea Tower is also the headquarters for the lower city's mercenary guard force called the Flaming Fist, and it's from here that the Flaming Fist can launch devastating attacks using the tower's large trebuchets on any unwanted visitors in the bay. Since I just mentioned the Flaming Fist, who are present in Baldur's Gate 3's Early Access, I should also mention the Watch, and the Watch is the guard force for the upper city. The Watch is a bit more limited in their authority, though, as they cannot act outside of the city proper like the Flaming Fist can. Like Ed mentioned earlier, this city is a great setting for the formation of a plot for a video game, and we already know that the Dead Three, Bane, Ball, and Merkel, seem to be taking advantage of Baldur's Gate's current crisis. The Grand Duke of Baldur's Gate, Alder Ravengard, was actually visiting the city of Elturel when Elturel was transported to the Nine Hells. Now, Elturel has since been returned to the material plane in a rather apocalyptic state, but Alder Ravengard is still missing. Alder Ravengard brought great order to the city, but with him gone and the current refugee crisis going on, this is prime time for the Dead Three to create chaos. And oh yeah, I forgot to mention, there's also a little bit of a problem going on with the Mind Flayers. Now, there's so much more to get into with the city of Baldur's Gate, but before I do a deep dive bringing us down into the dark, damp city streets, I want to watch Ed Greenwood's deep dive video into the city, which should be out now, and I will leave a link below. Like I mentioned earlier, please go over to the Ed Greenwood channel and show your support. Ed and his team gave up their valuable time to come speak to us, the Wolfpack, and that is amazing. So let's show our support back to them, and maybe we can have Ed and some other cool guests back on in the future. I'll catch you all on the next one, which should actually be on Sunday.